Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. As I promised earlier, I'm going to do a quick video on some of the updates that we've been doing to the car, specifically the battery relocation and the fueling mods. So let me go ahead and pop the hood and the trunk and we'll kind of show you what's kind of changed with the car. Okay, so we are under the hood here, and the first thing you'll notice is the battery is gone. I think a lot of guys are going to wonder, a lot of you guys are going to wonder why I didn't just go with a lightweight battery versus moving the battery to the back of the trunk. And a lot of that has to do with weight distribution. Going with a lightweight battery is fine. You take a lot of weight off that front left corner of the car, which naturally is the heaviest corner in the car. But if you look at the corner weights on the car, and I were to simply just take maybe 40 pounds off this corner, it doesn't do very much for weight distribution on the car. And I'll put a picture with the calculations that kind of show you the difference between taking 40 pounds off the front and then taking 40 pounds off the front and moving it to the rear right corner. And you can see that there's a 1% change in the front to rear weight distribution. 1% isn't a lot, but when you're chasing after the most ideal weight distribution, this is probably the best way to do it. Not saying that everyone would do it this way, but in my case, I thought it was worth the investment to go ahead and do that. So quickly in the front, I had the guys at TC Design relocate the battery, and you will notice right away that I have both a positive and a negative wire. The reason for that is I was told by TC Design that this car is designed to sense the load on the battery, I guess, to some degree. I don't know if that's for charging or whatnot. So there's a sensor on the negative terminal, I think. And so they had to run both a positive and a negative wire to the battery so that the computer would know what's going on with the battery and I guess decide when to charge it. This is 2-gauge wire, and everything's wrapped up in electrical tape to keep from shorting anything out. The wiring runs along the inside of this fender down to the bottom of the front door sill, and there's a grommet there that runs into the car. These wires follow that same path. So let me open the doors here and I'll kind of outline which way the wires are running. You're not going to see them because they're tucked away, but if you're looking to do something similar, it'll give you an idea of how this was routed on this car. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, the wiring runs through this fender. So it comes up the top, runs through here and down along the fender. And if you peek in between the door and the fender, there's a grommet down here. Both the positive and the negative wires run through there. They pop out just below the fuse box where your hood release would be, and then run along the door sill, tucked down underneath the carpet, along the driver, and all the way back here into the trunk. A couple of things I think about why they ran it on the driver's side. In the future, if I wanted to install like a battery disconnect, it would be near the driver, so the driver, when they're strapped in, can disconnect the battery in case of an emergency. I don't have one installed now, but I believe they routed the wires that way so that in the future, if I wanted to install something like that, I could. Let me show you how it's routed in the back. Okay, so you can see here, comes up underneath the carpet, comes out, and you see both the positive and the negative right there. It runs up and then across the car, right in front of the shock towers, and then over to the passenger side, and then into the back corner where it reaches the battery. And I'll go ahead and show you where the battery is right now. Okay, so here is the battery. There's no box for it. It doesn't need one. It's an AGM battery. It's sealed, so it's never going to gas, or at least it shouldn't gas unless it's being overcharged. There are nuts welded to the trunk, and then we've got some all thread and then a strap to hold this down. And then we've got some electrical tape here covering the connectors in case the battery slips and touches this aluminum strap holding everything together. Let's see, there is a fuse. So there's different ways you can protect the battery. You can use a circuit breaker or a fuse. I found this cool little fuse that you can install right on the terminal. And I've got a 200 amp fuse. These are pretty easy to replace. If they blow, just unscrew this, remove the connectors, and replace the fuse. And I've got a couple spares inside the glove box. 200 amps should be enough for the car. And realistically, 2-gauge wire is rated for about 205 amps. So I don't want to overfuse this and potentially cause a situation where a short might result, or I'm overfusing the wires because the wires can only take 205 amps. There's some additional wiring here for a relay that I'm not sure where it is, but it's here to trigger the fuel pumps. So let me go ahead and show you what's been going on in terms of fueling for the car. Okay, so I've got the fuel cover to the basket off here. Couple of things. So you've got some AN lines. I think these are AN10 lines running into the fuel basket, and those are going to the surge tank in the back of the car. And you can see here there's an additional wiring line, or kind of wiring harness or electrical harness, piggybacking along with the stock harness. Now, if I pop this open, I don't want to remove everything, so hopefully you guys can see this. All the fuel lines connect to the stock, or to this Radium basket here. This basket can take 2 fuel pumps, but there's only one. And this is for an STI because it has a return line. So what we're actually doing is using the return line from the surge tank to refuel the fuel tank, or refill the fuel tank when the surge tank overflows. And then it's using all of the factory crossover lines and fuel lines to the front of the car. I don't really need to run aftermarket lines or bigger lines. This car doesn't make that much power, so I don't need that much fuel. And as you can see here, they've tapped the factory wiring harness. Now, the wiring harness is not powering the fuel pump inside of the basket. The relay is, and that relay powers both the basket fuel pump and the surge tank fuel pump. We're only using the stock wiring harness to trigger the fuel pumps to come on or off. This actually causes a check engine light because the ECU is expecting a specific load from the fuel pump inside of the fuel basket, and because we're no longer powering it off the stock wiring harness, it throws a code, and this is something that the tuner will have to adjust in the tune to delete that code to keep that from happening. If I zoom out here, the fuel lines run up and across the car, just in front of the shock towers. Same with the relocation wires, and run over into the back corner, driver's side corner. So I'll go ahead and show you what they've built here to house the surge tank, pressure regulator, and fuel filter. Okay, so you can see here, fuel lines run across, and inside this container is the surge tank, fuel pressure regulator, and fuel filter. Originally, I thought they would have to build a bulkhead or like a firewall between the rear of the car and the trunk. Instead, TC Design opted to build sort of like a container. In case a fire were to happen, it would be kept in here. They thought this was a better design so I could still retain use of the trunk. And apparently this meets NASA specs, so this will be okay, and it works out better. There's also a wiring loom that you can't see here, but it runs through the back of the trunk and reaches the battery, and that's how we're powering we're powering this fuel pump as well as the fuel pump in the fuel basket. So I have to unscrew a couple of bolts here, and then I can remove this and kind of show you what's going on inside of this containment, or inside of this like cover. Okay, so here is a surge tank. Not super big. All the hoses running into it. Fuel pressure regulator is here, and this runs into this fuel filter that you see right here. This is a stainless steel reusable filter, so I can clean it and reuse it and don't have to replace the filter medium. The other thing we have going on here is a pressure gauge right here. There's actually two ports, one before the filter and one after the filter. So this is before and this is after over here, or over here. Sorry, not sure if I'm blocking you here. This one hasn't been used yet. It's currently just got kind of like a plug to keep it from leaking. The goal with that is to actually install a fuel pressure sender that'll run into the car and to the data logger. And that way I know the fuel pressure drop across the filter. What that'll let me know is over time is that as the filter medium kind of saturates or fills up, that pressure drop will increase over time. So I know once I have a sender on the post filter side of things, I'll have a pressure reading, and I'll know as that pressure reading drops, this filter's filling up and I need to remove it and clean it out. And I think you got to use like an ultrasonic cleaner, but we'll save that for another time. Currently the fuel pressure is set at 55 psi. The FA20 manual states that the stock pressure should be anywhere between 49 and 55 psi. I've set it on the high side because I know that there's going to be at least some pressure drop across the filter, even when it's brand new. Unfortunately, this whole fueling system has caused a problem with the car. The tuner believes that once I've installed all this, I need to retune the car. I'm not entirely sure, and he's going to know better than me whether or not that's something I need to do. So I'm looking to have the car retuned. Unfortunately, my current tuner will not tune the car because it's catless. Sort of a rule he gave to himself over the last few years, or since I've been tuned. So I've got to find someone who would do that. And that actually leads me to a question to you guys, is whether or not you guys think the car needs to be retuned. On an EJ, you need to retune it because the pressure from the fuel pump equals or is the pressure that the injectors see at the fuel rail. But because the FA20 is direct injection, there's a cam-driven pump on the motor, and that steps up the pressure from something like 55 all the way upwards of 2,000 psi, because that's just what the injectors run at. So the question then becomes, is if you're off by maybe 2 to 3 psi here, maybe 10%, right? Is that 10%? Does that really matter after you increase the pressure from the high pressure fuel pump? I'm not sure. And whether or not there's some room for error there, again, I'm not sure. Clearly, Subaru thinks it's okay. They've given you an operating window, 49 and 55 psi. But again, I'm not sure. And the last thing I want to do is run the car without having it retuned, have the motor go lean, and then all of this kind of was for no good. So currently, got some things I need to iron out with the car, or at least in terms of maintenance, and then I'm going to try to find a tuner to tune the car. And I think that's it for kind of the surge tank setup. I will say this is loud. I can hear both the fuel pumps running in the car. Part of that is because the interior on the car is completely gone, or at least in the rear. The pressure regulator here also has a vacuum port so that it can increase pressure based on boost. But again, for this car, because it's an FA20, that's not needed. And I think that is it. So if you guys have any questions or comments, concerns, please don't hesitate to ask. Hopefully you guys found this update interesting. And stay tuned. We've got a lot more going on with the car, and I'll be sure to update you guys when I have more info. Thanks a lot for watching, guys, and we'll see you at the next video. Take care.